In today's weather forecast, we're going to be taking a look at the model runs and how it will impact you and areas in the United States. We will likely be taking a look at an active pattern along with the potential for the tropics heating up. So without further ado, let's get started. First of all, taking a look at the European model like we always do. We're seeing a lot of this rain activity down here in the southern plains and the Gulf of Mexico. We're also seeing some of that shower activity for our Monday morning over the Canadian prairies. And as we take this in towards our Tuesday, we're seeing a lot of shower and thunderstorm activity along this cold frontal boundary extending from the northern plains all the way down to the southern plains. Not much activity along this boundary in the central plains, but we're seeing it here in the northern plains as well as some in the southern plains perhaps. And we're also starting to see some tropical rain showers starting to get going there. That'll be interesting setup there. But by the time we take this in towards Wednesday, the 12th time frame, we're still seeing that tropical moisture down here in the Florida peninsula, and we're also seeing some rain showers perhaps all the way from Canada to the northeast, and this will likely bring a cool down perhaps late week to Canada. Otherwise, it will be pretty hot south of the boundary right here. But regardless, taking it in towards June 13th, we are seeing a lot of the shower and thunderstorm activity along this boundary. Again, anywhere south of this boundary will likely be very hot on Thursday the 13th. And I mean hot. We could be talking 90s in some areas. So fairly hot there. But by the time we take it in towards Friday the 14th, we're seeing the potential for more thunderstorm activity here. Some of these could be on the strong side in the Ohio Valley and the Northeast, especially in the afternoon hours of Friday. And then as we take it in towards Saturday, the day before Father's Day, we're seeing that tropical moisture continuing. We're seeing a new surge of moisture starting to happen there. So we'll need to watch for perhaps maybe a weak tropical depression perhaps in the Gulf of Mexico. Not saying it's set in stone right now, but we definitely could be seeing a tropical depression with how long this sits over the Gulf. And we have very above average ocean temperatures. So that could easily fuel some sort of tropical system. So we're going to need to watch that closely. But regardless, we're seeing more shower activity up here in the Canadian prairies to British Columbia. And we're also seeing that thunderstorm activity, the isolated thunderstorm activity in a couple places. Otherwise, much of the United States remains dry as we head into Father's Day weekend. By the time we take it in towards Father's Day itself, could have some sort of severe weather threat up here in the north central plains. We could also have some tropical showers and some shower activity along this boundary. Could also see again some tropical moisture there in the Gulf Coast. By the time we take it in towards Monday the 17th, we are seeing this ridge sitting here where we're likely going to have this ring of fire pattern with the thunderstorm complexes going over the ridge. This will likely feel the potential for some sort of severe weather potential in the northern plains by the time we head into next week, while we're still dealing with this Gulf moisture, which is tropical by the time we go into early next week. By the time we take it in towards Tuesday the 18th time frame, we're seeing this low up here, which is very disconnected here. This is basically being driven by this big high pressure, that northwest flow. Again, those complexes of storms can't be ruled out, and we will likely see that along this boundary by the time we headed into next week. By the time we take it in towards Wednesday the 19th, something is popping up that we could have some sort of system here some tropical storm or even a hurricane, but this is a bit too far out to determine that. But the European model shows that eyeing portions of eastern Mexico, so we're going to need to watch that closely. That would impact this whole coastline right here if that were to happen, but we'll fine-tune that as we get closer here. But regardless, we are seeing a lot of moisture in Texas as we head into this time frame. We're also seeing perhaps another severe weather setup with thunderstorms all along this boundary, perhaps a derecho with this type of setup. We're going to need to keep all eyes on that. And then by the time we head into Thursday the 20th, we're still seeing a lot of moisture throughout the United States. And as we take a peek at our 500 millibar height anomalies, think of the blues as low pressure and the reds as high pressure, and the oranges also as ridging, and the blues as troughing. But anyway, we have this trough sitting over the northeast, which is ushering in a lot of cool air. The jet stream is so wavy at this point, I can't even show you, but it's so wavy there. But by the time we take it in towards the Thursday, the 13th time frame, we're seeing this high pressure system dominating the southwest, and we are also seeing this cutoff low. That's likely going to push this ridge a bit further east. So we have the thunderstorms firing along this boundary. This is why we have a severe weather threat for those storm complexes by the time we head into Thursday the 13th, and that would be in this general vicinity right here. And then as we take it in towards Friday the 14th in the afternoon, we're seeing this trough trying to dominate over much of eastern Ontario, getting into perhaps the interior northeast by the time we head into that time frame, with that cutoff low really not doing anything, just sitting there, maybe producing some light rain showers across portions of Arizona. Regardless, though, we are seeing this high pressure dominating ridge with this northwest flow over top of that. So we would be worrying about storm complexes perhaps like this by the time we head into Friday afternoon. And then as that sinks south, we'll likely see this type of setup, the mesoscale convective system derecho type setup here. Regardless, though, by the time we take it in towards Father's Day weekend, we have a high pressure system here. We have that northwest flow all the way up in Canada. So we're seeing a lot of hot temperatures along this entire region. By the time we head into the day before Father's Day, we could see widespread 90 to 100 degrees in this entire region, 80s at the least in this entire region. So pretty hot weekend in store for much of the United States. And just look at what this ridge does by the time we take it in towards next week. All right, we will likely have upwards of 100-degree heat indexes, perhaps with heat advisories in these circle regions by the time we head into early next week. All right, this ridge is going to be dominating like a ring of fire. All right, and I mean when I say that, all the thunderstorm activity and the shower activity is going to be up here in Canada, while we will be super dry and very hot in this entire region by the time we head into that next week time frame. As we take this in towards Tuesday the 18th, all signs are still showing this ridge is just going to sit over this entire region all next week, and we're still going to be seeing some very hot temperatures. However, look at this trough. This might be some sort of setup for severe weather, maybe in the northern plains. I mentioned before the precipitation models were showing some sort of setup in this region, and that would be very, very possible, especially with this type of pattern setting up. We could easily have those ring of fire thunderstorms rising over that ridge. So we're just going to need to keep all eyes on that. And then by the time we take this in towards Wednesday, the 19th, we're seeing this high pressure system right here. And we're starting to get back into a northwest flow type regime for this region of the United States. Complexes of storms will be a possibility all along that boundary, even if that ridge is dominating, because we will likely have that extreme northwest flow, like I told you before. So a derecho or MCSs for sure are not out of the question. Regardless, though, I think this entire circled region will be dealing with very, very hot temperatures over the course of the next couple weeks at the least. And let's take a look finally at our surface temperature anomalies here, where we are going to be taking a peek if we're above or below our seasonal averages here. And then this afternoon, that trough dominating there is going to cause a lot of below average temperatures, especially across this green shaded region and especially across this purple region, where we're upwards of 20 degrees below our seasonal, or 10 degrees below our seasonal average here. While in the west, we are dealing with a lot of heat, especially across California, and that will likely continue as we head into midweek before things start to move east. You can see by the time we take this in towards Wednesday the 12th, we are still dealing with some cooler than average temperatures. However, it's only like 2 to 5 degrees below average. So we're likely going to be warming up in all of this region. Don't worry, it'll be coming soon. And like a ring of fire, like it's roaring east, there's that heat already expanding into the northern plains. And by the time we take this in towards Thursday, look at all of this above average activity for temperatures across this entire region. This is literally all of the United States dealing with above average temperatures, except for a small sliver of the northern plains. That's about it. And even then, it's not that cold up there. By the time we take this in towards Friday, the 14th time frame, we are still seeing a lot of heat everywhere you look. We might have a little bit of a cool down up here in Canada, but that will not last long. Soon to be replaced by this huge batch of heat. This heat dome is going to soar northward very quickly, and this is going to cause above to much above average temperatures across all, if not much of this region by the time we go past Father's Day and into the second week of June. It's going to get very, very hot around much of the east coast of the United States, especially across this region. Like, this region is going to stay hot all through probably the rest of the month, and I do not see any cool downs here as this ridge is going to stick over much of these areas. Only exception is if that cutoff low makes it to Texas. Maybe there is some hope for some maybe cool down activity, but regardless, most of the country will be dealing with upwards of much above average to average temperatures. All right, folks, finally, let's take a look at our total precipitation across the United States through June 20th. All right, so we are already seeing that we could be well above average to slightly above average with our precipitation along this entire boundary here. While I think we will be a bit drier in these regions, like portions of the lower Ohio Valley to the mid-Atlantic, I think down here in the Gulf Coast is really going to be soaring above average there, especially across this region where we can have this heavy rain all at once. All right, upwards of 10 to 15 inches of rain could potentially be recorded along this boundary. All right, much of this is the Gulf of Mexico and water, but look at Florida. All right, there's that anomaly there. We can have upwards of 10 to 15 inches of rain just in 1 or 2 days with that tropical activity over the Florida peninsula. That's going to raise many concerns for flooding at the least across that region. And you can definitely tell that high pressure system is dominating because we literally have little to no precipitation over in this region or even in these regions right here. So it's a bit drier across some chunks of the United States. However, much of the United States is seeing a ton of precipitation as we head into the second week of June. Alright folks, last thing before I end the video, finally we're going to take a look at the tropics and we're going to be doing a model comparison here. So starting with the European model, it likes to surge a lot of this moisture into the Florida peninsula by the time we get into tomorrow. All right, this would start tomorrow, and it would likely not end until like this whole thing backs off. Like it's still ongoing by the time we go into Thursday the 13th, and we're also seeing a renewed surge of moisture that could potentially surge northward too. As it does that, look at that, more moisture is being advected westward from this region. All right, so we are going to get very much rained on and poured on in the Florida peninsula and the central Florida area as well, and we're also seeing a lot of moisture down here too, so just be geared for that as well. Mexico, and then as we continue this time frame, all indications states on this European model that it takes it out here on Saturday the 15th, and it potentially turns it into something tropical. All right, I'm not saying it definitely will, but it's trying to form that kind of shape. All right, and that would veer westward if that were to happen. You guys can see how it does that, but it looks to break up. Regardless, though, we will likely see a ton of flooding in Mexico. We'll likely see a lot of moisture funneling in this entire region of the Gulf Coast in the southeast. It's going to be very wet over this next week or so, and even as we take it in towards Father's Day, it's going to be a very, very damp Father's Day for areas of this region. All right, and I mentioned the European model showing something developing. There it is, right there, just west of the one of the islands of Mexico. This could be a dangerous setup. All right, the European model is showing something perhaps trying to develop. There's that 1,000 millibar. There's that low finally showing up there, and then it dips to a 997. All right, so I mentioned on the precipitation tracking here, we could potentially see some sort of low-end hurricane or maybe a tropical storm if this thing deepens anymore, as this model shows. But regardless, we are seeing widespread moisture out here and many ample opportunities here, hence us having the really soaring above average ocean temperatures, as well as very, 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 very little wind shear out in the ocean, limiting this. And this would likely allow for a lot of development from these tropical waves. So we're obviously going to need to watch this over the course of the next week or so, of course. All right, folks, last thing I wanted to look at for the model comparison is the GFS model. And the GFS is always being the GFS with these tropical systems. So don't be surprised if you see a setup on here. By the time we take this in towards late this week, this model definitely, both models agree that we could have a lot of moisture funneling in to these regions, all right? But the GFS shows something deeper than the Euro shows. It shows something developing here, but it doesn't show a 998 millibar low. All right, this is why there's a lot of uncertainty between the modeling as if there's going to be a tropical storm over here, is there going to be a storm in the Gulf of Mexico, or is there going to be a storm in Florida? We don't know that information yet. All we know is that these models are trying to fight back and forth and seeing which one is right, all right? This one shows a little less moisture than the Euro did out here. The Euro model showed a lot of moisture in this entire region, but the GFS is keeping it limited, surprisingly. But by the time we head into next week, into Father's Day weekend, look at this. We have a lot of moisture funneling in by the time we go into this time frame. But like I said, the GFS doesn't have it nearly as widespread as the European does. However, it does perhaps try to develop a depression as it's trying to make landfall on portions of the Gulf of Mexico region. All right, again, this is just one model, but I'm comparing the two, and the GFS is definitely a bit more intense than I anticipated it to be. I anticipated the whole ocean to be filled with green and precipitation, and luckily, the GFS doesn't show that, which maybe it could be right for once. However, I don't have too much confidence in that. As we take a peek at Tuesday the 18th, look at this moisture. Very heavy moisture just offshore of western Mexico. That would raise concerns there. We have a lot of tropical moisture funneling in, and this is turning into a lot of rain across portions of the Ohio Valley, as it shows by the time we head into this time frame. Regardless, though, this one likes to show all of this moisture affecting all of the southeast. So that would potentially put a flood threat in all of these regions with that heavy rain moving onshore. So we're going to need to keep eyes on that. Regardless, though, this one does not show as many storms as I anticipated it to. The European and GFS definitely have at least some agreement that we could get some sort of system right here and right here. So these are the two areas I'm watching for the next weeks or so, and these are mainly offshore. However, some of those may be going onshore. Just be mindful that we are likely going to see a ton of moisture regardless if you get a storm or not. All right, so just be mindful of that. All right, folks, the last and final thing I wanted to show you on this video is that the National Hurricane Center still does not have a tropical outlook, and that is all because the comparison between the European and the GFS models are very uncertain and very highly uncertain at that. So this explains the reason there is no outlook for this yet. However, I want to say, guys, this may change, so make sure you're following updates with the National Hurricane Center as well as your National Weather Service office. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe if you not already. Have a great rest of your Monday.